Okay, so today we're going to be talking about projection. Projection is an extremely important concept to understand because it is basically the mechanism that is causing all of your suffering in life. So let's just get right to it. So you might understand projection as a defense mechanism used to deny and repress traits that are uncomfortable to admit to. Now, this is the classical psychological definition of projection, and most people would understand it as a defense mechanism that comes up during arguments or uncomfortable situations. But projection actually happens all the time. Projection occurs all the time from the vantage point of the ego. It's actually projection that maintains the ego because it keeps you preoccupied with that mechanism. So the mechanism of projection which leads to attack. Another simple way of putting it is projection makes perception. So everything you perceive in the world is actually something that you've projected. Your beliefs are projected onto the world, and that is what you see. In this sense, you can't actually engage with the world from the ego's point of view without perceiving your own projections. So if you remember from the first video that I made, we had Steve trying to smoke in Bill's house. And Bill was saying, don't smoke in my house. If we think about Steve's perspective in the framework or the understanding of projection, what is actually going on for Steve when he's confronted by somebody who's not letting him smoke when he wants to smoke? What does projection actually look like to Steve or for Steve when he's interacting with other people in the world? In the most basic sense, what we think we see isn't actually there. It's like a movie that first passes through a filter before it is displayed on the screen. So at a movie theater, and how movies used to be played, there is a film that passes in front of a light, and that light projects the image onto a screen. If you are projecting that image through a filter, it would change the way the image actually looks. That filter within our mind, when it comes to the mechanism of projection, is our beliefs, our conditioning, our programming, everything that has built up the way in which we think about the world. We think the world works, or we think is true about the world. You're not actually observing unadulterated perception or sensory input from the world. You're projecting out onto the world a filtered understanding based on beliefs and expectations. So we could say that the movie's being projected. It goes through a filter of our own beliefs. That filter colors the projection. And so what ends up on the screen of life is not just the film, but the coloring of our beliefs. So you can see that these two characters on the movie screen are now colored by red because the filter that the movie's passing through is red. And then what comes back to us as we perceive the film of life, for example, metaphorically, is not just the film, so you can see the orange and the blue of their clothing, but you can also see the red. And then when that reaches us, we create a confirmation bias. So Steve is saying to himself, see, I was right. Everything is red. But he doesn't understand that the reason he's seeing red is because he's projecting that red out into the world. Within our example of Bill not letting Steve smoke in his house, we can think about Steve's perspective based on his belief systems. So Steve might hate Bill for being uptight. And if he does, there's a subtle belief system in Steve that's perpetuating hateful perception and the propensity to attack. That might sound a bit extreme, that Steve hates Bill, really? He really thinks he's being uptight? Any form of attack comes from a form of hatred or anger. And you can only be hateful or angry if you're projecting. To see the world truly as it is, there would be no hatred, there would be no anger, and there would be no attack. Let's explain this a little bit more clearly, get a little bit more detail. So from Steve's perspective, he doesn't just see Bill, he sees what he's projecting onto Bill. From an outside perspective, say ours, looking at the story, there's Bill simply asking Steve not to smoke in his house. And that's all there is to it. But for Steve, he might see Bill's asking him not to smoke. Not just not to smoke in his house, that almost gets wiped out. It's not relevant to upholding the ego and perpetuating a attack thought framework. He sees, okay, Bill doesn't want me to smoke. He might not even think, oh no, it's his house. He doesn't want his house to smell like cigarettes. I should respect his space. It might go straight to, he doesn't want me to smoke. And within his subconscious mind, he relates that to, my mom doesn't want me to smoke. Go even further, and he remembers everything that his mom doesn't like about him, ever since he was a child. So you can see that he's not just experiencing Bill asking him not to smoke in his house, he's experiencing his mom disapproving of him, unaccepting of him, that is projected onto Bill. So we can see here the movie of life is not just the movie of life, that would be this. His mom and her unhappiness with him is being projected onto Bill. So Steve actually sees his own self-criticisms when interacting with Bill, who is just asking him not to smoke. Why are they self-criticisms? Because they're programs, and they've been instilled and reinforced since childhood. Because his mom put those programs into Steve by telling him that he wasn't good enough, she doesn't approve what he does, and as he got older, he started smoking, so of course, then she doesn't like him smoking, and on and on and on, until he's now an adult and he's interacting with the world, and he doesn't know that he's actually projecting all of these reinforced paradigms and conditioning onto the world. But Steve can't just blame his mother, because blame is still attack. It's still a form of attack. He can't just blame his mom for everything that's ever happened to him, for all the bad perceptions he has of the world, why he can't have healthy relationships, yada yada yada. Everyone likes to blame their parents, but you can't do that on the spiritual path. If you're going to take it seriously, you have to forgive. He has to forgive Bill, and he has to forgive his mother, and most importantly, he has to forgive himself. You might wonder, why does Steve even have to forgive himself? I mean, you can understand, okay, he needs to forgive Bill, for upsetting him, because it's a projection that is causing Steve to be upset. It's not actually Bill. Okay, so I can let that go. I can forgive Bill. All right, so I understand I have to forgive my mother because, I can't hold on to blame and a grudge over what my mom may have conditioned me to believe. But why myself? What have I done wrong? The reason he has to forgive himself is because attack engenders guilt. He needs to forgive himself because when he attacks, he has made himself feel guilty for those attacks. Say he's getting angry at Bill and gets in an argument and sees Bill as somebody he hates, thinks is uptight, wants to attack for his belief systems or his request. That's actually subtly and subconsciously creating guilt. And he has to carry around that guilt for attacking his friend, and he has to forgive himself for doing the same to others. And this is something we might not necessarily know that we do. So I've drawn an example. He might not be aware of his projections or the guilt he feels subconsciously. So here I've drawn Steve is in a relationship, and he's asking his girlfriend in a rather unpolite way, criticizing her. Maybe he started off gently, but he doesn't like that she drinks so much soda. And he thinks, it's really bad for your teeth, your enamel, it's bad for your health, it's going to be bad for your heart. Just stop drinking soda. And it really bothers him that she drinks soda, and this is making her upset. Does that remind you of something? Steve's mom is always telling him not to smoke, and he sees that as, you can't accept me. He's not willing to quit smoking based on criticism and being put down. And his girlfriend is not going to be willing to quit drinking soda based on criticisms and being put down. But we can see here that very likely he's actually doing the same thing to other people in his life, because that's how projection works. When he's engaging with the world, he's projecting onto the world all of his belief systems, all of his conditioning, all of his subconscious programs. That's creating attack. So he attacks Bill, he attacks his girlfriend, he attacks Bill for seeing his mother, he attacks his girlfriend for behaving like his mother, and that engenders guilt. And it's just this vicious cycle of attack, guilt, attack, guilt. And now Steve is miserable because he's always walking around with guilt in his heart and a propensity to attack others based on his projections. But forgiveness breaks this cycle. Let it go breaks this cycle. Forgiveness is the same as letting go. When you forgive somebody, you're letting go of the grudge you have against them. You're letting go of whatever you believe that they've done wrong. Once Steve forgives just one person, he will realize that everyone deserves forgiveness. So he can forgive either himself, his mother, or he can forgive those he projects upon. If he forgives Bill, then when Bill is forgiven, he realizes that Bill is completely innocent. There's actually nothing wrong with Bill asking for him to not smoke in his house. That will open up enough space for him to realize that his mom is also innocent. And there's nothing inherently wrong with her telling him how she feels. But he perceives it that way. It makes him feel sad, yes, but he doesn't have to perpetuate that sadness. In fact, perpetuating the sadness or the anguish over not being accepted by his mom is perpetuating separation and his ego, and it won't help him go further on the spiritual path. At some point, he needs to forgive. At some point, he needs to let go, or he'll always be holding on to that negative emotional paradigm associated with his mom. Whenever he thinks of his mom, he's going to think about what she feels about him, and that's going to make him upset. So the only way that he can let go of that is through forgiveness. Or, of course, he could forgive himself. And if he forgives himself, he knows that other people are just as worthy of forgiveness, deserve it just as much as he does. What happens with the path of letting go and radical forgiveness is you realize that there is nothing that cannot be forgiven. And forgiveness does not mean that you condone behavior. It means that you're letting go of the thing that is hurting you. Blame hurts you. Guilt hurts you. Grudges hurt you. Hatred, attack, and holding grudges and refusing to forgive is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Steve could go to his grave hating Bill, hating his mom, criticizing his girlfriend, and that's all he'll be achieving. All of that negativity pent up in his body, not achieving anything productive, healthy, or helpful, and all the while he'll be miserable. to let go of that misery and to live a happy life where you see love, you see joy, you feel love, and you feel joy, is to forgive, is to let go. So maybe you can think about in your own life how projection is working for you, how you might be perceiving situations or people in the light of your own projections. Within mindfulness and meditation practice, you can discover your own belief systems, your own conditioning, your own programming, and you can let that go. You can stop blaming other people for how you feel, because how you feel and how you behave is under your control. And if you're going to take the spiritual path seriously, this is part of the work. So thank you for watching. I hope this helped, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.